welcome back to another episode of Wealth in Christ podcast show where we inspire the masses to become financially free while building God's kingdom. On the podcast today, we have Bob Lotich, who is the host of Seedtime Money Podcast, a podcast where Bob and Linda, his wife, teach people to build wealth for kingdom impact. In this podcast, we're going to discuss how Bob, he was able to pay off $400,000 in debt and give over $1 million plus by the age of 40. So thank you for being here, Bob.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm excited to chat, brother.
How are you doing today?
I am doing good. It's a sunny, beautiful day. I was just sitting out on my laptop on the front porch, and I love it.
Yeah, that's good. So what were some steps that you and your wife had to take to get rid of this debt of $400,000?
Yeah, I mean, so we did the normal stuff that, you need to do. Like we had a budget in place and we stopped spending our money stupidly like we had been doing for a long time, and not everybody is doing that. Some people find themselves in debt for reasons beyond their control. But in our case, that's what most of it came from. So we stopped doing that. So that was a part of it, and that was making some progress. But since we are talking to Christians specifically, I think one of the important things to mention for us was that God kind of challenged us as we were paying off our debt to begin giving more, which seemed like pretty counterintuitive, because I was thinking, and a lot of people often think this, like maybe I should not give as much while I'm trying to pay off debt so I can pay off debt faster. And I think there's arguments for that making sense, but in our case, we felt like the Lord was leading us to give more and basically double our giving. So we had been tithing, and we felt like God was saying, I want you to double that while you're paying off your debt. And and that was a little bit of a struggle for me, to be honest, because it's like, I'm looking at the numbers, I'm a math guy, and I'm like, there's no way this is ever going to help, but it turned out we ended up paying that debt off years faster than we would have otherwise. So yeah, it was one of those moments where I'm like, all right, God, your kingdom is different. The way you do things is different. And so, I'm glad to be part of it.
That's well said. So would you say you did anything particular, to still keep up the different payments that you was making to the house or a credit card you was paying off while you were still giving that still allow you guys to make things on time and still do what you guys have to do?
Yeah. So, I mean, everything was, we increased our giving at that point, and there were still, like, every extra dollar that we had, we were putting towards those debts, trying to pay them off as fast as possible, and doing, like, we pretty much did the snowball approach, like focusing on the lowest ones, smallest balances first. And I was working side hustles and trying to find ways to earn extra money so we had more money to put towards it. So we were doing all the common sense, natural things to pull it off. But at the end of the day, tapping into the supernatural component of what God could do, that's what really helped us move down the field really quickly,
That's well said. And what are some of the side hustles that you was taking part in to help?
Yeah. So at that point, I was really just trying to start different businesses. And so I started a eBay business for a little bit. I started a candle making business. I was making candles and selling those for a little bit. Neither one of those really panned out to being much. But then I started this blog, and that ended up turning into a full-time living, really just like a year into it. And so I'm really, really glad I did. But even had it not, like, being able to provide a few extra $100 a month really would have helped us get things paid off a lot faster.
That's well said. That's well said. And I want to ask, even through the whole process of you trying to add more income, I can just imagine the stress that you had as a man, and wanting to provide for your family. How were you able to still find time to be creative, to even start or think of, I should start an eBay, I should start a blog account, how did you find that peace?
So do you mean, how do you find the time? Is that what you're saying? Or
the time, like the time to create? Because, I'm sure your mind was all over the place. So how were you able to find that time?
I mean, we all have the same number of hours every day. And for me, I just had to be honest with myself about how I was spending every extra minute of my day. So sure, a lot of them were accounted for, and I was newlywed at that point, so I wanted to spend time with my wife. But there were certainly hours within my week, many of them, that weren't fruitful, that whatever, maybe I was watching the equivalent of Netflix at that point. Netflix in its current form wasn't around. It was DVDs in the mail and stuff. But uh, whatever that thing was that I was doing, where it's like, this isn't really taking me anywhere. It's just kind of time I'm wasting. And so just being honest with myself about how much of that time there is, and then choosing to use that time to build something that could change our future and could impact a lot of different things. Like, yeah, it was just kind of an intentional decision and being honest with myself about that,
That's well said. That is well said. And I want to ask, so when did the blog page did take off where you realized you could do this full time?
Yeah. So in 2007 is when I started this blog and spent about a year working on it part-time, probably 10 hours a week or something like that. And in early 2008, I was making $100 a month from it, in which I felt like that's something, but far from a full-time income at that point. And anyway, in June of 2008, I actually got laid off from my job, and I started looking for another job, and I felt like the Lord was saying, no, don't look for another job. And I'm like, well, then what should I do? What am I going to do if I'm not looking for another job? And I felt like he said, I want you to work on this blog full time. And so then I reminded God that I was only earning $100 a month from this blog and how bad of an idea that was. To which he said, can you trust me? And so anyway, it's pretty scary, because it's like, this makes absolutely no sense. But we decided to do that. And so from June 2008, I became a professional blogger, making $100 a month with my blog. But the cool thing is, like 9 months later, God just put his hand on it and the thing took off. And 9 months later, we were earning more from that blog than my old day job. Like, it was just crazy.
Wow, that is definitely some crazy fate. And I want to, ask you two questions in regards to fate. But my first question is the mindset that you had to have. You spoke about, when you started this paying off your debt, God was trying to increase your tithing and your giving. I can just imagine the mindset switch you had to have to like trust God. Like, okay, this is God and this will work out. Like, I'm gonna trust him regardless of what happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mindset component. I think it's a faith component. I think there's multiple things here, but yeah, it's, we see this all throughout the Bible, like God calling people to do things that are just seem crazy and seem like the only way this works if God's comes through, And I've just always, as a Christian, just kind of not had much interest in doing it halfway. I mean, really, not even as a Christian. Before I was a Christian, I was just all or nothing. It's like, I'm either going all in or I'm not. Like, I'm either gonna be a full-blown sinner, like as good as it can be, or I'm going all in with God. Um, and I don't know. I just kind of think it was the same type of thing where it's like, it's still scary. Like, I mean, and God is still calling us to do things that, yeah. I mean, just a couple months ago, I had something that's like, all right, this is new level scary, but we've just seen God come through time and time and time again. And as you continue to see his faithfulness, it just makes it a little bit easier, each time.
That's well said. And I want to ask this question. You being the man of the house, and you want to provide for your family. I'm sure you had to like had this conversation with your wife that you're going to be given this amount of money. So what was that conversation like? To tell that you're going to taking this money to use to give to people, and you guys had to pay off.
Yeah, I mean, it was a conversation. I mean, I've very much see myself like as a spiritual head of the home, and I want to play that role, but I also understand my wife's value in the conversation, and so so it very much was a conversation where we just chatted about, I explained like, this is on my heart, and both of us pretty much have a good track record of when the other one says like, I really feel like this is God, that we each just kind of go with it, unless we feel strongly that, all right, let's talk about this some more, because I'm not really sure. And I think both of those instances, God had just given her a heads up. And any of these instances where we've kind of done some bold things in terms of giving, feels like God has just given her a heads up, like before I came to her, so that it was easy for her to just get on board, because she I mean, I have to give her a lot of credit. Like, she just jumped right on board with a lot. And I think that's why.
That makes sense. And I want to ask, during this time you went full time, did you ever question this is gonna work out, or what would
Oh,
you do if it didn't
oh
work?
yeah, 100%. Like, I mean, I had backup plans and stuff, but it's like there was part of me that's like, this is really exciting. I think there's something here, but I don't really know. But I feel like I should do it, and so. But yeah, I mean, I definitely felt like an idiot at the same time. I felt like I very well could fall on my face and just really embarrass myself with this. Um, and so I had all those feelings, all those concerns. But Linda and I pretty much decided it's like, we have a good amount in savings, and we'll use that as an on ramp for the next few months to try to get this blog off the ground. And if it doesn't work out and we run out of money, then we'll go find a job. Like, so that was just kind of our backup plan for it. And we just never had to use it.
And both of you guys were working on the blog, or she was also working?
At that point, she had a job. She was working at our church as a receptionist. Now she's a bit more active in everything we're doing, but at that point, she wasn't.
No problem. So I want to ask, because oftentimes in this, debt journey, people usually give different, advice. Would you say for someone who wants to start this debt journey or in this debt journey, that they should focus on more on starting a side hustle compared to what you did? You started a whole business, um, which there was not any kind of guarantee whether there was going to be any kind of income. So what would you suggest someone to do
Yeah.
in that
No, I
position?
mean, and that's a good question. And yeah, and I did call our business a side hustle, but I mean, I understand it's not a guarantee in those regards. But, there's a lot of different ways to approach this. And I think it depends on your fervency, how much you desire to get out of debt, and whether you're willing to take the risk of doing something. So, for example, like I could have gotten whatever a more traditional side hustle, like delivering pizzas or something like that, in which I would have known that I have a guaranteed whatever $10 or $15 an hour. But in this case, or in any case of starting a business, it's like there's a risk it might not amount to that much, but there's also a potential that it could amount to way more.
Yeah.
And so it's like that's the life. It's like managing risk and sorting through those things and figuring them out. So I feel like it's a tough thing. Like for me going back to it, I still feel like I would do it the same way again. Jeff Bezos has this quote that I really like that I've tried to kind of adapt or adopt, I guess, in a lot of areas of my life. And the quote is this, to this effect. I don't know that I have it perfect, but it's basically if you find yourself in an opportunity where you have a 10% chance of 100x return, you should take that bet every single time. And the idea being, 10% chance of it succeeding. So that means 9 out of 10 times you're going to fail, but 1 out of 10 you're going to succeed. And when you do succeed, it's 100x return. And so you can fail 9 times, and then that success is going to so far greatly, cover all those losses. And there's a lot of people who don't have that. I don't know, with a mental fortitude maybe to like stick through that many failures, but. And the other part of this is that it's never black and white. You never know exactly what percentage chance you have of whatever. But I tend to look at things through that lens, and especially when it comes to investing. Like right now, I'm thinking through that with a lot of different things. What are the things where there's a disproportionate upside for me to run in this direction if this thing works out? Like it could be huge, versus if it fails, what's the downside? And just kind of comparing those two side by side. And when I do that, it just makes it a little bit easier. So that's how I'd be thinking about it again. If I were in that situation right now, whether I'm trying to decide to go do Uber Eats or start a business, and potentially maybe even both, maybe, spread it out and do a little bit of both.
That's well said. That's well said. So I want to ask, so once the income started coming from the blog, were you still doing the snowball method to get rid of the debt, or how were you
Yeah.
about managing the money?
Yeah. So we did that, and I'm someone who I probably could have pulled it off either way. I'm very much a numbers nerd, and I think we would have gotten our debt paid off either way. But it's been interesting. I found a couple of studies that at least according to the studies, have proven that the debt snowball method is more effective, statistically speaking, than whatever the debt avalanche method, whatever the one is paying the high interest rates off first. And so that's just fascinating. So that's typically what I'm recommending to people, just because if it's working more for the average person, then I'm like, great, let's do it.
No, that is definitely great. And I want to ask something, ask you another question, because I read that, you and your wife have two different perspectives when it comes to money, like your habits. So how
Yep.
were you able to combat that and deal with that situation in most
Yeah.
efficient way?
Yeah. And this is really common, I mean, I think most married couples that we talk to, it's like they have very different perspectives on money. They grew up, there's so many different beliefs and mindsets that we all have about money. And, and then we bring them together, and then it's like, why are you acting like that? Why do you spend money like that? It's, well, I don't know. My parents taught me this or whatever. So it's really, really common. In our case, like we both were kind of middle class suburban Americans, but still, like, our parents had very different philosophies on money and the way they approached it and what we learned from them about it, good and bad. And so we had to sort through all that stuff. And yeah, I mean, there were challenging conversations that came out of all that, and plenty of fights we had about money. But in doing that, in working through that and trying to understand each other, and kind of validate each other's side and approach. Like, one of the things that I feel like God showed me that was really, really helpful for me was that he brought us together for a reason. And so even though I'm the numbers nerd, I'm the math guy, and I have all these, I have the spreadsheets kind of proving that this is right, and the way she spends money isn't right. Like, God showed me, he's like, listen, that's not true. Like, I'm not limited to math. I brought her in this marriage for a reason. She's here to benefit you. And so, and you both have something to benefit each other. And as I've seen that and kind of humbled myself to acknowledge that she might not just be wrong the way that she spends money, and it might just be a matter of perspective. It's made my life so much more enjoyable, like, just in terms of how we spend money. And on top of that, she's done the same thing. Like, she's grown and learned from me about how to spend whatever. What's the best way to say it? Just a little bit more constraint under spending. Maybe that's the way to say it. And so it's just been good. It's just been really healthy. And so I think that the humbling thing of having honest conversations is really helpful.
That's great. And I know you guys, I read that you guys have separate accounts. Is that still the case? Have you guys have separate accounts?
Yeah. So just to clarify, so we have separate budgeting accounts. So
Mhm.
all of our bank accounts, we have both of our names on them. And I personally think that's important. I don't want to be in a situation where I'm hiding money from her, or, playing defense just in case she runs off with another guy or something like that. Like, to me, that doesn't feel like the healthiest kind of precedent to set. And so we have joint accounts, but that are both labeled for each one of us. And we use that as separate spending money. So each month, at the beginning of the month, whatever, a few $100s goes into hers, a few $100s goes into mine. And what I love about it is it's guilt-free spending. So she can spend it on whatever she wants, doesn't matter how dumb I think it is. And I don't care, because it doesn't affect me. And it's the same with me. She doesn't care or judge me based on what I spend. I don't have to ask for permission or any of those things. And so, like, it just removed a lot of fights for us, because before we had it all in one bucket. And then, like, when she's getting ready to buy groceries and I go to Lowe's and buy a saw or something, she's yelling at me because we got to buy groceries, and we just don't have any of that anymore. So it's been really nice.
That's well said. And I want to ask you, because I had a conversation a few weeks back, with some group of friends, and we were talking about joint account versus having a joint account with your significant other or your wife
Yeah.
versus having a personal account and having also a joint account.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to hear your perspective. Do you think that it's better to have a personal and a joint, where you can do that freely, spending without no guilt? And does that limit the trust that you have? Because that was their argument that having that personal account where you can do whatever you want, it limits that trust. So based on your experience, does that affect you guys' trust?
Yeah. I mean, so again, like, our specific individual accounts, like, they're still joint accounts. So
Okay.
I can always act, like, if I had to, I could access the money in her account and vice versa or something like that. But I think at the end of the day, uh, it doesn't really matter what you do as long as your heart is right. I think fundamentally, if you're in a situation where you're trying to hide stuff from your spouse, I could think that's just not good. And you could be doing that with joint accounts. Like you'd be doing that, putting cash, in a bookshelf or something. Like you could do that any number of ways. So I don't think necessarily having a single account without your name on it is that big of a deal. It's just if the intention is to keep money from your spouse, then it feels to me like that is just not the healthiest marriage. And I think that that is something that could be grown in. And if I were in that situation, like I would want to be praying or reading a book or seeking a counselor or something to grow in that, to have more trust of my spouse.
That's what I said. And I want to ask this question. So what would you say is some questions, for people who are courting and they plan on getting married to ask each other in regards to finance?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot here. I think it's just really important to have a conversation early on, before married or as soon as you get married, like just talking about what your goals are and just understanding your honest goals for your future. Because there's some people who don't care about living with tens and tens of thousands of dollars of credit card debt and are fine doing that for their entire lives. And I'm not one of them. Like, and if Linda would have been like that, she's like, I just don't ever care. Like, I will do that forever. And like, at the end of the day, like, I think all of us who are believers following Jesus, like we're going to marry who God leads us to marry. I think that's going to be the thing and should be the thing that we make that decision on. But I think it's important to know and to have these conversations on the front end, just so you know what you're getting into, what you should be talking about. All the ducks are on the table or cards on the table, whatever the analogy is. So I think that's just really important, just to be talking about what are the things that are important to you financially. And again, like trying to get an understanding of how they grew up financially and like really looking at how their parents spend money, because oftentimes, even if their parents don't intentionally teach them about money, it's like you learn just by being around them. Like that's how we all learned about money, because so many of us don't have parents who taught us a whole bunch about money. So we just naturally behave like our parents did. And so I think that's a way to get a glimpse of how you think they might do money, is see what their parents do. But anyway, does that help?
Yeah, that definitely helped. And I want to ask, what going back to mindset real quick, what are some resources that you use to help you build your mindset and fortify your mindset while you're going through this process?
Yeah. I remember reading a lot of early in this phase, I was reading a lot of Zig Ziglar, and who, just a great brother who passed away a few years back. So a lot of that, the motivational type stuff. I was watching some Tony Robbins stuff, and then just getting my hands on as many books as I could in the financial world. And then, of course, the Bible, like just tying up, connecting the dots between what I was learning in the financial books, financial courses, and whatever, all the stuff, and connecting that to what I was seeing in the Bible about money. And so you have this, ancient wisdom that's been in here all along for us to tap into, and then some modern day practices and approaches, and then like connecting the dots on them. So I always loved that. But I would say that was a lot of what was filling my mind in those days.
That's great. And I want to ask about that, combining the ancient, knowledge and wisdom that's in the Bible and what we read in current. Like imagine it was a challenge, the way how the Bible tells us to view money as Christian is very much different from how these books or the self-help books we read. So how are you able to take what you got to take and go with it?
Yeah, like it's a tricky thing, because I consume a lot of different content, and not all of it's from Christians. And so there's a lot of times where I'm chewing the meat and then spitting out the bones, and learning, observing that sometimes non-Christians tap into biblical principles and reap the rewards of it without even knowing it, and that there's wisdom to be gained from them. But there's also stuff that it's like, this is not, you're off on this. I mean, so Warren Buffett is one of those guys who so much of his success, like you can break down and attribute it to biblical principles.
Yeah.
But yet, like there's so much about the guy that I wouldn't take his advice on. Um, and so that's something that, some level of discernment. And that's one of I did a spiritual gifts test, and that was one of the spiritual gifts I registered high on. But just, I think being able to discern if something is right, solid biblically or not. And yeah, just being able to sift through the information to identify what I should receive and what I should leave,
That makes sense. That makes sense. And that leads to my next question. How would you suggest Christians to look at money?
Um, as a tool. I think there's too many Christians who have bought into the world's lies that it's the goal. It's the thing we should just be chasing after above all else. All of our decisions should be made based off of how much money we're going to make. And it's just not true. Like for the Christian, that's not the thing. Like for a Christian, it's a tool for us to fulfill what God has created us to do. And when you understand that, you put yourself in a position to be able to use it for his glory and to not let it, to not be pulled under by the deceitfulness of riches, like so many are. And so that's always been something that's been really important to me. Like, how do I maintain a heart posture where I see that money is simply a tool, and that God is always my provider, always will be. Doesn't matter how much is coming in or out. He's always the one that I'm looking to as my source. And how can I use what he's entrusted me with to advance his kingdom, to just fulfill whatever it is he created me to do.
That's what I said. So how do you do that? Make sure your heart is still in that posture, that God is focused and you don't get caught up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think a lot of this comes down to following the nudgings of the Holy Spirit, and obeying God when he leads you to do certain things. And so one of these things, one particular example is 2017, God called me to take a 1-year sabbatical and step away from my business for an entire year. I did not want to do that. That was not my plan. I am not the type who just wants to sit around for an entire year and not work. So that was like a really big step of faith for me, something I didn't want to do, not to mention, like, I didn't know how we were going to pay the bills and all that stuff. God did provide through it all. But my point in the context of what we're talking about here is that, in that, like, I came to understand, God revealed to me that there were things in my heart that were just off just a little bit. And it wasn't like anything major yet, but if I didn't address it then, 5-10 years down the road, it would become something major. And so that's the thing. Like, so many of these little heart things, we can't see them ourselves. We don't know what's going on in our own hearts. And so we need God to reveal them to us. And so that's why it's so important just to be listening, and being aware. Proverbs says, above all else, guard your heart. Guard your heart. So that's, just been something that I've been trying to do as best as I can, listen to what he has for me and where he wants me to go and what he wants me to do, because a lot of times it involves our heart. It involves him trying to help us keep it clean,
Yeah, that's definitely well said. And I want to ask, what's some assets or things that you're currently investing that's bringing you some type of income, whether it's your business or stocks that you may be into?
Yeah. So a lot of stuff. I have been getting more and more into crypto in the last 2.5 years. We don't need to go there yet, but handful of stocks. Like, yeah, I'm very much an index fund guy. I like, just S&P 500 index fund just for the base level of simplicity and of consistency over the long term. And within that, like, I also really like picking growth stocks that I feel like I understand, that I'm really interested in. So one that I've owned for 10 years is Tesla, and I still own it, and I will still buy more. Like, I might buy more soon, because my confidence in Elon Musk is, I've learned a whole lot about that dude, and it's really, really high. Like, I actually just bought some Twitter, and I know the deal last I heard might not go through, but if it does go through, I feel very confident that that's going to be a good investment over the long term, with him at the helm. And then in the crypto world, like I've lost a good amount of money and I've made a good amount of money in the last couple of years in crypto. But I don't know, I'm more and more convinced that just Bitcoin is like going to, I don't know, who knows, but I'm confident for myself that it's going to be a good longer term investment.
That's well said. And I want to ask, just going back to the statement you made in regards to the business, how you said that you take the chance of having a 10% chance, even though nine out of 10 times you're gonna fail.
Yep.
And I want to ask in regards to like investment, is that the same approach you have?
100%. Yep. No, so some of the crypto stuff, I mean, very much falls in that category where it's like I might lose all my money, but I also might, whatever, if not 100, maybe 50x or something, my money in this case. Like if they succeed at what they're trying to do, will that be the case? So another stock that I kind of bought with that intentional bit was Lucid, which is a competitor to Tesla, and the jury's still out of whether or not they're going to be able to scale and really ramp up production like Tesla has. But anyway, when I bought it, at the time I bought it, I pretty much was thinking that it's like they're either not going to be able to succeed as a car company because most of them fail, or if they do succeed and make it as a viable competitor to Tesla in this industry, like this is probably going to 50x. And so, so it falls in that category of I'm okay if I lose all this investment, because it's not my rent money, it's not grocery money. But if it succeeds, it'll be a really big win.
That's great. So that leads me to how do you go about budgeting to have that money if you do lose it? Is not going to affect your rent money or your day-to-day living.
Yeah. So, I mean, what that looks like, just practically for us is every single month at the beginning of the month, certain amount of money gets moved directly over to our investing account. And so it's a constant stream of new money being moved that I can use for different investments. And so, so it's not cutting into any of our monthly expenses. It's just an extra chunk moving to that account,
That makes sense. And what would you say is the biggest lesson or a few lessons you have learned over the years in your entrepreneurship investing journey so far?
I think, real high level, from a principles perspective, I think most people underestimate how fast things can move over whatever, a 10, 20 year period. Because when you look at something just from a 1 year period, it's like it might not change that much from year to year. But over a decade or over 2 decades, it's like it's amazing how much things change. And so just going back to this, so I started investing 16 years ago. And my first investment was $500 into a utility company in my town. And it was like the safest stock I could find to buy. And so that was my first investment. And I didn't know what to expect from that. But that started me on this investing journey, and I just continued to learn. I continued to make more investments, continued to put more money into different things. And, like looking back on these last 16 years, like I was just writing something about this recently and kind of like had to figure this out. I realized I think we've been able to give away like probably $400,000 strictly because of our investing. Wow. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like I wouldn't, 16 years ago, if you would have told me that, I'm like, there's no way. Like in 16 years, we'd be able to give away that much just because we invested it, grew it, and then gave it away. Like, so, and I think that's what most people miss is that from year to year, it doesn't seem like the big a deal, but over the long term, it can be a lot,
No, that is definitely well said. And I wanted to ask, so how did you go about, you and your wife, forming this podcast, creating this podcast, Seedtime Money? What led you guys to create this podcast?
Yeah, so I actually started a podcast in 2008 when shortly after I started the blog, and no one was listening to podcasts. It was kind of a different technological era because you had to have an iPod and you had to plug it into your computer and they had to download them on your iPod. And, it was just kind of a lot of friction and work to actually listen to a podcast. And so not as many people were listening to it. But once the iPhone came out and people could do all this stuff wirelessly, it just changed the game. And so we did that for maybe a year or two back then. And then we started up again, probably 3 or 4 years ago now. And yeah, and it's, podcasting is just a different medium. And I just really like it as another way to kind of communicate outside of writing blog posts. So it's been fun.
That's well said. And where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years?
I don't know, just hopefully continuing to reach more and more people, just helping them succeed and win with money, for God's glory.
That's well said. And that was my last question I want to ask. What would you say is the biggest challenge, people face, in this journey of trying to become financially free?
I don't know. There's so many different challenges that people face. Like, I think for me, we've talked about mindset a little bit, but I think for me, mindset was a big part of it because I kind of grew up with a limited mindset of what was possible with God. And I'd gotten a pretty small box. And the more I've walked with God and I've watched him do miraculous things in our life, the bigger my box is getting, to where I'm starting to understand a little bit more, there's no limit to what God can do. And I think that when you have limiting beliefs and you limit your expectations of what God can do, it really hinders you. Mm-hmm. And so just being in this position of having faith and boldness and expectation, and just knowing that God really can do exceedingly abundantly above and beyond all you can ask, think, or imagine. I don't know, that just opens some doors there. So I would encourage anybody, just continue to ask and pray for that expansion, because I think that's a big deal.
No, that's definitely well said. I want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for this opportunity. Where can people continue to follow on with you and hear more about your podcast?
Yeah, so the podcast is Simple Money, Rich Life. We just finished a book called, the book is Simple Money, Rich Life. My head's spinning. The podcast is Seedtime Money. But yeah, we just finished up a book, kind of wrapping everything we've done and learned in the last 15 years into it. So yeah, people can find that anywhere, or the podcast at pretty much anywhere as well.
That's well said. That's well said. For those who are listening, I hope you guys take this, not just as another podcast, but actually use this information and apply it to your life, grow your mindset and trust God through this process. If you guys don't know, I have a free study guide that can show you how you can get started in the stock market completely for free. And you can get my website at wealthinchristbrand.com, and stay tuned for the next week episode. And thank you again, Bob.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.